April is so lame this year. There's nothing to review. There's nothing that's coming out. There's nothing I can see for my worst or my best list. What am I gonna do? I have like no videos this month. What am I gonna do? You know what? I guess I should probably catch up on more movies. What's a movie I haven't seen yet, though?
What's a movie that a lot of people have been talking about that I haven't seen? It's very popular.
Smurfs, The Lost Village is a new Smurfs movie, obviously. We've had two other Smurfs movies in the last few years that I'm sure a lot of you saw and hated just like me, and now we have been graced with a third Smurfs movie, but this movie isn't actually in the same universe, I guess. It's kind of a reboot of the Smurfs, except it's not in live action. There's no Neil Patrick Harris, there's no live action things. This is actually like the Smurfs was supposed to be. Like, it's in the actual Smurfs world, it's fully animated. It's actually like the classic Smurfs cartoon, and it's like, this feels like this is the movie that should have been released way back when the first movie was. And this one basically centers around Smurfette, who is the only girl, and she was created by the evil Gargamel or whatever his name is, and she's part of this group of boy Smurfs. They're all male, she's the only female, and she sort of feels out of place, so she basically wants to find other Smurfs that may be similar to her, and basically Gargamel has stuff up his sleeve, and it's just, yeah, it's Smurfs. There's not much to the plot, really. So guys, I was obviously not looking forward to Smurfs at all. I thought the trailers looked terrible, but the one thing that intrigued me was that this movie actually is sort of similar to what the cartoon was supposed to be, because they had the first two Smurfs movies, which are live action, and they sort of blended CGI with live action in that movie, and this movie is basically full CGI, it's full animation. It actually takes place in the Smurf world, so I was actually sort of intrigued, but the trailers looked terrible. It looked like it was just another generic kids movie, and I didn't grow up with the Smurfs like a lot of other people did. A lot of people grew up watching the Smurfs cartoon. I never seen a single episode of the Smurfs cartoon, so the only Smurf experience I've had is the first two terrible movies that are universally hated. I'm sure the question you're all asking is this movie down to the lows of the first other two Smurfs movies? Is this movie as bad as those two? And it absolutely isn't. This movie is miles ahead of the first two Smurfs movies, actually. This movie actually is competent. It's not good, but it's sort of competent. Let's go with the pros first. Easily the best thing about this movie is the character of Smurfette. She's the only character that's really given any development at all. She sort of feels out of place because she's in a world full of the opposite gender, and she's basically the hero of this movie, and she's the only character that's given some sort of development. You can't really figure out what her personality is, though. She's kind of just a fine hero. There's nothing really great about her. She's just fine, she's okay, she's not really that good, but she's by far the best character in the entire movie. The animation also looks fantastic in the movie. I really like that this movie actually takes place in the Smurf world. It doesn't take place with them trying to blend in with live action stuff, because that looks terrible, and it was terrible, and it was so bad. But this movie is all fully animated, and it takes place in the actual Smurfs world, and I really did appreciate that they actually did that. They went back to the actual what Smurf is supposed to be. And this movie is going to be very enjoyable for kids. Kids can sit down and watch this movie and be entertained for an hour and a half. But are adults really going to be entertained with this movie? No, which is kind of a shame, because there are a lot of adults that did grow up with the cartoon. A lot of adults are big fans of the cartoon that they grew up with. You'd think that the newer Smurf movie would actually have some adult jokes and actually some themes that adults can latch onto, since the majority of Smurf fans are actually adults that grew up with the cartoon. You'd think they'd actually do that, but no, this movie is purely for kids. This movie, the entire thing, is just a bunch of dumb kids jokes the entire movie. It's purely for kids. There's nothing that adults can latch onto at all. If you're babysitting a kid, though, could you watch this movie and not hate yourself? I'd say yeah. None of the jokes are really funny. The plot is incredibly generic, incredibly predictable. Everything about this movie is predictable from scene to scene. everything you're gonna predict what's happening, and none of the jokes are funny at all. I didn't find a single funny joke in this entire movie, but kids are gonna eat it up. So if you're babysitting somebody, like a young kid, you could probably sit them down and have them watch the movie, and you can just like relax on your phone while Smurf plays. You all know what the Smurfs are, basically. They're just a bunch of generic Seven Dwarf from Snow White ripoffs. They're all just, they have things, their characters are based off their name. And for this movie, there was so many different characters and so many different names that were just copying off the Seven Dwarfs. And they're so one-note, and I didn't care about any of them at all. There's too many of them, so it's kind of hard to actually keep track of all the different characters in this movie, because there's like Clumsy and Grouchy. Yes, they actually have a Smurf called Grouchy, and all kinds of other ones that it's so hard to keep track of all of them, actually. And you can't care about any of the characters at all, except you slightly care for Smurfette, even though she's not really that great of a character, I guess. Gargamel is also just your generic, goofy children's movie villain. Nothing about this movie really has anything surprising about it. It's just a movie where it goes through the beats and it's just like enjoyable for kids. Everything's predictable, everything's generic. There's nothing that's gonna stick with you in this movie. Even towards the end of this movie, I thought they were gonna do a choice that would have been actually surprising, and I was like, wow, they're actually gonna go this route? And then they don't do it. They take the predictable generic route, and I was like, okay, good for you. You could have done something that bumped this movie up a little bit more from just being a generic kids movie to something that's actually a lot better. My best analogy for this movie is basically the Trolls movie that came out last year. This movie and Trolls are just generic kids movies. There's nothing memorable about them. The characters are just fine. It's generic. It's predictable. The entire thing doesn't really have any effort behind it. While watching this movie, I was like, I wish this money could have gone towards a project that actually has effort behind it and actually is trying to be a really good family movie. This movie is just like, Smurf is a cash cow, so let's make a kids movie that doesn't pertain to anyone else, and it's just a generic kids movie because Smurfs, they're a money machine. That's all they are. While watching this movie, I was just super bored. I felt like the entire movie was just stalling because it's so generic, it's so predictable, it takes forever to get anywhere because they have to put in tons of silly filler for the kids to actually make this movie an hour and a half, and it's just, it's a waste of time. Don't take your kids to this movie. If you think it's gonna be a good Smurfs movie just because they actually are true to the cartoon this time around, it's not good at all. It actually kind of sucks. But is it a step up from the other two Smurfs movies? Absolutely, it's much better. Those movies literally have nothing good about them. There are some things about this movie that surprisingly works, but overall, it's just a really boring, generic kids movie, and nothing about this movie is really gonna surprise you. It's just really devoid of effort, unfortunately. I'm gonna give Smurfs The Lost Village a C-. Alright guys, if you like my review of Smurfs, be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out all my other videos when they come out, and all the other videos I've done so far, and all that jazz stuff. Yay. Alright guys, I will see you next time. Bye bye.